Hi again. Walter Rauschenbusch, The Last Chapter of Christianity and the Social Crisis, page 417. We're right at the end. Only two more segments to go. This chapter, the last chapter, is entitled What to Do. It is inevitable that those who stand against conditions in which most men believe and by which the strongest profit shall suffer for their stand. The little group of early Christian socialists in England, led by F.D. Maurice, Charles Kingsley, and Hughes, now stand by common consent in the history of that generation as one of its finest products. But at that time, they were bitterly assailed and misunderstood. Well, this is the generation in which Rauschenbusch himself was born, but the generation before him. Pastor Rudolf Tott, the first man in Germany who undertook to prove that the New Testament and the ethics of socialism have a close affinity, was almost unanimously attacked by the Church of Germany. But Jesus told his apostles at the outset that opposition would be part of their day's work. Christ equipped his church with no legal rights to protect her. The only political right he gave his disciples was the right of being persecuted. It is part of the doctrine of vicarious atonement, which is fundamental in Christianity, that the prophetic souls must vindicate by their sufferings the truth of the truth they preach. And this is an excerpt from a poem by James Russell Lowell, the poem called Columbus. Disappointment's dry and bitter root, envy's harsh berries, and the choking pool of the world's scorn are the right mother's milk to the tough hearts that pioneer their kind and break a pathway to those unknown realms that in the earth's broad shadow lie enthralled. Endurance is the crowning quality, and patience all the passion of great hearts. These are their stay, and when the leaden world sets its hard face against their faithful thought, and brute strength, like a scornful conqueror, clangs his huge mace down in the other scale, the inspired soul but flings his patience in, and slowly that outweighs the ponderous globe. One faith against the whole earth's unbelief, one soul against the flesh of all mankind. Rauschenbusch goes on, the championship of social justice is almost the only way left open to Christian nowadays to gain the crown of martyrdom. Theological heretics are rarely persecuted now. The only rival of God is Mammon, and it is only when his sacred name is blasphemed that men throw the Christians to the lions. Even for the social heretics there is a generous readiness to listen, which was unknown in the past. In our country, that openness of mind is a product of our free intellectual life, our ingrained democracy, the denominational manifoldness of our religious life, and the spread of the Christian spirit. It has become an accepted doctrine among us that all great movements have obscure beginnings, and that belief tends to make men respectful toward anything that comes from some despised Nazareth. Unless a man forfeits respect by bitterness or lack of tact, he is accorded a large degree of tolerance, though he will always be made to feel the difference between himself and those who say the things that please the great. The certainty of opposition constitutes a special call to the strong. The ministry seems to have little attraction for the sons of rich men. It is not strange when one considers the enervating trials that beset a rich man in a pastorate. But here is a mission that ought to appeal to the rich young man if he has heroic stuff in him. His assured social standing would give him an influence with rich and poor alike, which others attain but slowly, if at all. The fear of being blacklisted for championing justice and mercy need have no terrors for him. To use his property as a coat of mail in fighting the battles of the weak would be the best way of obeying Christ's command to the rich young ruler to sell all and give it to the poor. When Mr. Roosevelt, that is, Teddy, was still police commissioner in New York, he said to the young men of New York, quote, I would teach the young men that he who has not wealth owes his first duty to his family, but he who has means owes his to the state. It is ignoble to go on heaping up money. I would preach the doctrine of work to all, and to the men of wealth the doctrine of unremunerative work. End of quote. The most unremunerative work is the work that draws opposition and animosity. Mr. Roosevelt implies here that a man's duty to his family is the first and dominant duty, and that this exempts him in some measure from service to the larger public. It follows that the childless have a call to the dangerous work of the kingdom of God. A man and woman who are feeding and training young citizens are performing so immense and absorbing a service to the future that they might well be exempt from taxes to the state and from sacrificial service to the kingdom of God. If, nevertheless, so many of them assume these duties in addition, the childless man and woman will have to do heroic work in the trenches before they can rank on the same level. It is not fair to ask a man with children to give his time and strength as freely to public causes as if he had none. It is still more unfair to expect him to risk the bread and the prospects of his family in championing dangerous causes as freely as if he risked only himself. The childless people should adopt the whole coming generation of children and fight to make the world more habitable for them as for their own brood. The unmarried and the childless should enlist in the new apostolate and march on the forlorn hopes with Jesus Christ. Next time, the last 2 pages of Christianity and the Social Crisis. I'll put in a link to a video Vivian did on parenting. This is the second of 2 videos. Can we make sure our children hear the whole counsel of God?